What's up guys, this is Yasin and today we'll be going over the best budget decks that you can play right now, because even though a lot of people might want to believe that this game is kind of, pay to win and everything, you need to have a lot of money for the Fiendsmith engine, for the Primate engine, for the Malice cards, for a bunch of staples. Honestly, it's not too bad. There are a lot of really nice alternatives, even if you're completely broke like me, obviously. So, I really feel for my, brothers and sisters out here. I will be covering, I think it's like 32, 33 decks in this video, and I got 4 categories. So the decks that are cheap and really good that I really recommend, the decks that I think are a great long-term investment but not necessarily super great right now, the decks that are, cheap but not necessarily the best, and the decks that are just overall not worth playing. Yeah, anyways, before you go any further, you already know the drill. Smash the like and subscribe button. And also a huge massive shout out to my Crystron spreadsheet, Blue-Eyes spreadsheet, and website. And if you've never heard about them, here is the promo. So I am proud to announce that after all these years, I have finally created my own website dedicated to selling all kinds of products and services, including spreadsheets and coaching sessions, and I do plan on adding some merch in the near future. Most importantly though, the long-awaited Blue-Eyes spreadsheet is finally here, and for only $25 US, you can become the next Dragon Master. This time though, the spreadsheet comes with a whopping 75 combos, including uninterrupted lines and through handshots including Nibiru, Bestials, Drool, Furos, Veiler, etc. The combos also cover pretty much every build that you can think of, so regardless of the direction that you choose to go for, there is something for you. I'm not gonna spoil too much, but I have managed to cook up some combos that can make 12 disruptions if they go through, and still put 10 disruptions through Nibiru. I also cover my own personal deck list alongside the explanation behind each and every single card and ratio that I play, so that you can understand the deck even if you've never played it before. There are tons of other benefits associated behind the spreadsheet, including access to a Discord community where I plan on hosting classrooms to help everyone master the deck efficiently. So if you're interested in the spreadsheet, you can buy it directly on my website using a credit card or PayPal. The link will be at the very top of the description box below. Anyways, with that said, let's get on with the video. Absolutely gorgeous, but anyways, let's get right into it. So the first deck is a Tearlaments, which is cheap, but I don't even think it's a good long-term investment. It's not necessarily bad, but this deck needs so much to become good again, and you're also spending your money on like so many different cards. It's not like a huge amount, but if you don't even have a deck, I don't really recommend this deck if you're like on a tight budget. It's not the kind of deck that I can randomly see just being broken out of nowhere. Konami really needs to want to push that deck, which at the current moment, there is no reason for them to do so. And also, this is a lore deck, and the lore is already behind us, so not the best timing to look into Tearlaments. Labyrinth is actually anywhere between a great long-term investment and cheap and broken. I think at the current moment, it's not necessarily a top-tier deck, so I'll try to keep this section only for the decks that are already extremely good. But I think this is like a super long-term investment. I mean, a super good one, because trap decks have a tendency to just dodge the ban list every single time. Konami just wants to really destroy the combo decks that are making like 10 plus negates on turn 1. And, rightfully so, but the trap decks, they're less degenerate, obviously, not only in the player's eyes, but also in Konami's eyes. So a deck like Labyrinth is a deck that has a very high likelihood of not getting nerfed on the ban list, which means that your cards are not going to depreciate in value, and this is exactly what you're looking at if you're trying to build a Labyrinth deck. And also, there's infinite ways of building this deck. You can build a more expensive deck and also a cheaper deck. If you have, the very cheap and easily accessible trap cards like Destructive, the Rumakara Cannon, the Solemn cards, which they got reprinted so many times that this is not really an issue for you. So yeah, this deck is, I think, a really good deck if you're trying to get into the game, and also if you don't really have too much money to spare on the game. Thunder Dragon is just a deck that I don't recommend overall, because if you're trying to build this deck because you're on a budget, it also means that if it ever becomes good one day, you're gonna have to start spending your money on other cards that are probably just not related to Thunder Dragon at all. Because usually when this deck does well, it's because of other cards. It's not really just because of Colossus and Shifter. It's also because it was played in, Danger Thunder, Crusader Guard Dragon, a really hardcore combo deck that was worth a huge amount of money. And the Thunder Dragon cards, obviously, they were worth something, but I don't really think this is like a great investment. In terms of mid-range decks that are good, there is infinitely better. And as long as engines like the Fiendsmith engine exist, Colossus is almost too easy to out, unfortunately. Yeah, you just make Engraver, Requiem, equip targets, send to the graveyard, or not even destroying, so the protection effect is irrelevant here. Anyways, Flunderies, exactly just like Labyrinth, very similar arguments. This deck is a very good long-term investment, and it's not the kind of thing that I can really see just getting destroyed on the ban list, unless like Shifter and Featherstorm get banned, but Flunderies cards themselves, yeah, they're just completely dodging the ban list left and right. Sword Soul Teny, another deck that I don't think is super insane right now. It's not garbage, but it's very cheap, and this is the kind of deck that is just gonna keep getting better and better over time because it can get Teny support, but it can also get Sword Soul support. And we saw that in Supreme Darkness. Like, it didn't really get like direct Sword Soul support, but the deck still got better just because of more Teny cards. And this is exactly what you're looking at when you're trying to build a deck. If it's like a hybrid deck, then there's always more ways that your deck can become better. Whereas if your deck is like a pure deck, it just needs like direct support, which is a little tougher. But also if your deck is a trap deck, then it just needs more generic trap cards. So again, if you're new to the game, this is really good advice for you, I think. Purely is also a great long-term investment just because, I mean, the cards are worth absolutely less than nothing. And if Dimensional Barrier ever stops seeing play, then this deck could actually be great for you. And also going first, if you manage to make the Big Cat, regardless of the deck they were playing against it, it's really scary. That card is super annoying to beat regardless of what you're playing against, so it really just doesn't matter. Chimera, you can actually build this deck as you get more money and start incorporating more engines. Like, you can play Azamina Chimera, which is not worth too much. But if you want to start playing like the expensive illusion cards, the Fiendsmith engine in your deck, this is where it becomes really expensive. So that's the reason why it's not in cheap and broken. Otherwise it would have been, but the Fiendsmith engine is very expensive in this deck, and I think it's really good as well. So unfortunately that's kind of a problem. But you can also play with like the Despia engine, like Branded Fusion and like Fallen Avabaz. You can play some cheaper cards like the Frightful Patchwork engine, not worth too much money, and it's still really good. Plunder Patrol, yeah, I don't really think this deck is super worth it. It's like anywhere between like not worth and cheap but mid, but I don't know. It's way too slow. Exorcister is like that cheap deck that is also very mid. Like, okay, sure, it can play Shifter, it's kind of cute. Like, it's not bad at all, honestly. I don't really despise it, but it's just the kind of deck that needs like insane support to be good one day, so I don't really believe too much in it in 2025, unfortunately. Unchained, very good deck as well. Very similar to like Sword Soul Teny in the sense where it's not like super broken. It might get collateral damage if Caesar gets banned, but I don't really think that's gonna happen. I think Fiendsmith cards are gonna get banned or limited instead, and this deck should get a pass. If you're trying to play pure Unchained, then this deck can get better over time just with Sharvara going back to 3 because at the crit moment it's at 1, and it's kind of annoying. But I think the most expensive card in the deck is Yama, and apart from that, not worth too much money for the deck. So yeah, the Fossil Dyna Bearer Statue stun deck, it's kind of like the new Runic stun. It's not worth a lot of money, and it's not like utter garbage, but yeah, just mid. Like, going second, your deck sucks, and that's about it. Vanquish Soul. If anything, I think this is actually a good long-term investment, because again, there can be more Vanquish Soul support, but there can also be like a format where people play all the wrong handshafts for this deck. Like, they play Shifter, they play Bestials potentially, Nibiru, and a bunch of cards that just do not affect this deck, and they can really capitalize off of that, because this deck doesn't really lose to handshafts. It's just that it has a really low ceiling, so it's not good against decks that are like hardcore combo decks that can just destroy and overwhelm this deck. But if it's like a mid-range format, this deck can really be good. Right now, this is still a combo format. Like, Razor Fiendsmith is combo, and Malice is a combo deck. Despia, also a really good long-term investment, just because, I mean, it's a really powerful deck, even though I don't like it. But yeah, no, I can really see this deck becoming, nice one day. Dinosaur, this is kind of between great long-term investment and cheap but mid. Probably just gonna have to be there just because there can be new Jirac support in Terminal World 2. And it's actually gonna make the deck really nice, and at the current moment it's not worth anything. Okay, Fire King, this one is really interesting. So this actually just won a YCS by Din Kabui, and there's a relatively good reason for that. Is because Garunix is really grindy. I mean, the deck overall is really grindy, but Garunix that keeps coming back from the graveyard is definitely really scary for the deck, and the fact that you can run over the Detonator but also destroy it with a Kirin means that even the protection effect is not going to be enough, and you're triggering everything during the damage step so Detonator can't respond, which is really good for you. And yeah, no, overall it's a really intricate deck. It's a very layered deck. That's what I like. You have threats in your hand, field, and graveyard, and you never stop playing. Like, you can be on top deck mode, make an El Mirage using like an Effect Veiler, and then crash, and then the Garunix comes back, and then your whole engine is in rotation. So it's a deck that is really good in the hands of a good player. And it's really funny because before Din Kabui won the YCS with the deck, I probably would have put it here. I mean, somewhere in this section, but he definitely opened my eyes to the possibility of just playing an unexplored grindy deck and just do well with it just because you're good with it and your opponents are not playing correctly against you. Buster Blader, I think, is really good, especially if you play the Blue-Eyes package. Unfortunately, going second, it's not the best. So I'm probably gonna have to put it anywhere here. It's definitely something that you can look into, honestly. If I go second against this deck, I am shaking in my boots. Like, this deck will FTK me when it goes first, like, especially uninterrupted, but sometimes you have a hand trap and it obviously doesn't matter because they physically hard drew the prologue, and also that engine can be like generically played in whatever deck. But then you also play some bad cards in your deck, but in Buster Blader it's not really relevant because if you draw the Buster Blader, it's not really something that hurts you too much, so that's really cool as well. You can hard synchro the Buster Dragon and it never goes away. That's awesome. It's even, this package is even better in its own deck than it is in other decks. That's nice. Anyways, Traptrix, another deck that I think is, yeah, sure, it's not worth a lot of money, but it's not super amazing, and I don't really think it's like a super great investment, but it's not garbage. Crystron, if you want to play pure Crystron, I think this deck is not bad at all, actually. I don't know if I would necessarily place it here. Because you can play, you know, Terratop, Takatomborg, Cherubini. It's not worth a lot of money. You can also play Tidal. If you don't want to play, you know, the Kashtira cards, or I guess Azamina, whatever, Horus, etc., all those cards. There's a lot of engines, but there are some expensive cards in the deck, like Corian Gondrax and Citri. Apart from that, the deck overall is worth, like, almost nothing. Like, the core is super cheap. I obviously a Soul Fafnir, but whatever. Maybe you're lucky and you still have, like, some super old Crystron cards in your bulk, and out of nowhere, you're rich, and you can easily afford this deck. Anyways, Blue-Eyes, pure Blue-Eyes from, you know, all the structure decks, and you add some cards to them. So the deck is dirt cheap, literally worth nothing, because if you want this deck to be good, like at an entry level, like level, you can just play, you know, 3 structure decks, add like 3 Bingo Machine, add some hand traps because it already comes with a decent amount, and then you can play 15, 16 1-card starters if you play 1 Prosperity in your deck, which is worth nothing, and then you can play 7 bricks, so 2 Blue-Eyes, the Mausoleum, the Roar, the Majesty, missing 2. Yeah, hold on a second. It might be 6. No, maybe it's 7. Ultimate Fusion maybe and something else. And then you play, you know, 17, 18 hand traps. And then we're already looking at a really competent deck that can definitely keep up with the format, just because you're playing a lot of starters, you're playing a lot of hand traps. This is a recipe for success when you're trying to deck build. And the fact that you can do this in a very easy to access deck, because the structure deck just came out, is definitely something that you should capitalize on. So I think this is a very solid deck, not only right now but also in the future. Orchis, on the other hand, is a deck that is not great right now, but it's super good in the future just because the new support is insane, and it's really just 2 Link monsters. But the fact that 1 single Link 1 and 1 Link 4 were enough to make this deck go, become pretty much like tier 1 in the OCG for a brief period of time, is already impressive to my eyes. But unfortunately, it does have to deal with Artifact Lancia, so the collateral damage from the existence of Malice is unfortunate for Orchis. Nonetheless, it remains a great long-term investment, and if Malice were to get a hit, then Orchis could definitely be a really good option. At the current moment, it's like arguably in like the top 5 best decks in the OCG, and honestly, that's good enough for me. That already warrants it being in this section. And I think the only expensive card for Orchis would be like Symbol Skeleton, which is worth like maybe $5. That's about it. I think everything else is like super cheap. Anyways, Galaxy-Eyes is another super good long-term investment. And this one, it's because of the new support from Maze of the Master. And this deck, everybody and their mother is going to misplay against you because there's a lot of different cards. And the deck is actually really good. It's really funny because I think it has kind of a bad rep of being played by people who aren't necessarily great at the game. But Galaxy-Eyes in the right hands, I think will actually be a tier 1 deck, or at least close to it, when the new support is going to come out. There's a lot of really good cards. It's a Swar's Child, Infinity Dragon, 7 Tachyon, obviously in its own deck. That makes sense. Overall, it's a really consistent deck. It has a lot of starters. It can even play Shifter even. It can do infinite things. Huge fan of Galaxy-Eyes. Really recommend looking into it. I've made a bunch of videos on this deck in the past, but I think I'll keep making more as we get closer to Maze of the Master. Also, just to refresh myself on how it works. But yeah, anyways, Hero. Yeah, this doesn't really look like Hero too much. I don't really know. I guess probably here. I don't know. Yeah, it's kind of like a cheap deck, depending on how you build it. There's infinite ways of building Hero, so I don't know. Maybe you can play like the Toe Turbo build that people used to play in like 2016, or you can play the hardcore combo deck like 46, 60 cards that people are playing right now. I don't know. Mimighoul is probably at the very top of this section just because it is a TCG exclusive, so at any moment we can get spoiled by Konami and just get like absurd support, but at the current moment it's not like a super top tier deck, but it is still nonetheless a good deck. Marin says, sorry, Madolce, Jesus. This one, just not a really big fan. Like, we need, like, anti-Nibiru support. Otherwise, right now, it's really tough to beat Nibiru in this deck. Sky Striker, maybe, like, somewhere here. It's not bad. Like, the engine actually is really good. So if you invest in the deck, at least you get the engine, and then you can start playing it in other decks. But the deck itself is kind of mid, unfortunately. Marincess is kind of like the same. It just, like, yeah, sure, you can play a lot of starters. The deck is cheap, but it just does nothing, you know? That's my issue. Like, you can play a bunch of... like hand traps as well. Like the deck has a very similar recipe as everything here, where you know it's a bunch of self-sufficient cards, and then you draw cards on your opponent's turn with the Link 4. I forgot the name. It's basically, I don't know. The deck is mid, honestly. It's not garbage, like I said. Speedroid, another kind of mid deck, but at any moment again it could get nice support. Whereas these decks, I think they're kind of doomed at the current moment, because we already know that there is Trickstar, Aqua Angel, and unfortunately it wasn't enough to make this deck worth playing. And Sky Striker, yeah, we already know about the new support that's gonna take like 7 years to come out. Raid Raptor, yeah, this one also a good long-term investment, because if there's ever a board breaker format and people can't out unaffected by card effect monsters, this deck is like absolutely correct. Eldritch is a really good deck. This one would probably be somewhere here. Yeah, definitely right behind Labyrinth, maybe even above, just because at the current moment, I think this deck is cheaper, and also the new Eldritch support is extremely good. Really recommend looking into it as well. Live Twin, or Evil Twin, whatever, maybe even here, because again, we get new support, and it can work with the Sprite engine, and it can work with the Fiendsmith engine, but the Fiendsmith cards are super expensive. So it's really up to you on how you want to make this deck work, but I think it has infinite potential, and you can definitely look into that. Sprite is also an extremely good deck, and literally worth nothing at all. And this deck can always get better over time, just because there can be new level 2 monsters that can make this deck worth abuse. I mean, they can make Gigantic Sprite worth abusing in your deck. And finally, Tenpai Dragon. This is the most competitive deck in the section. I think this order is, for the most part, kind of accurate, maybe. If we're looking at like pure Fire King, maybe it's like better than pure Crystron. Not even. Not really. Yeah, you also need like Dominus Impulse to make this deck like really good, but then you can also just side deck the card. I don't know. Whereas pure Crystron, it's really just Citri and Quarian Gauntrak. So this deck I think is cheaper, and for the amount of money that you're spending, maybe it's like more efficient. But Tenpai Dragon is worth literally nothing. Like, you only have to buy like a couple of Tenpai Dragon cards, which are worth nothing at all. And then some board breakers, which you could argue you should already have at this point. But yeah, that's pretty much it for this tier list right here. Thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe. And let me know if you have any other ideas of really good budget decks that you are trying to play this format. And I'll see you guys very soon. Peace.